Well, I honestly didn't think I'd be talking about this so soon or possibly ever again in my life, but here we are. This is unsustainable. Who'd have thunk? Actually, it's not this. This is awesome. This is amazing. It's this. That is unsustainable. I don't own land. I don't own a building. And in the past few months, that has become very apparent to me. So, yeah, something's got to go. You can't have space without the cars, and you can't have cars without the space. And here I thought that the expensive part of having a car collection would be the cars. Definitely the building. So take note, former me, younger me, you're gonna fuck up. It's gonna be fine. Due to some off-screen changes in my life, which I'm really not ready to talk about, and due to some on-screen changes in my life, which I'm also not really ready to talk about, but I will tell you the story of the old warehouse one day, something's gotta change. And I'll tell you one thing, right now in my life, what I'd like to do is just finish the breakups. So here we go. It's funny, you know, I never set out to be a mechanic when I first started doing this. I thought I was on a roll with some cars that I had gotten at the time. The BMW, you know, I put together that weekend when I got it in college, and I drove it 50,000 miles after that. The Spitfire, I did a little tinkering that weekend and over that winter, and I've driven it like several thousand miles since then. This Volkswagen never needed a damn thing. I was on a roll with some like good luck with that kind of stuff. And I lost sight of the fact that not only is that not usually how it works with project cars, but even if it is, you still have to maintain all of them. They still all have to run, drive, and like be roadworthy, and even sitting is one of the worst things that a car can possibly do. So I just I think at some point, holy shit, about to drop that. So you can't do that with a $12,000 paint job. And no one's the wiser. I think I lost sight at some point of the fact that this is like a lifetime worth of cars, you know, to fix. It's a month or two to drive them all for any reasonable amount of time, and it's going to be a lifetime to fix them. So I've got to get rid of some of them. And yeah, I think we're warmed up. We can cut all that out. I don't know. I've had a lot of people telling me that I've got too much going on. And it's funny, right? Because I look at all of this and I don't get overwhelmed by the number of cars. I don't get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that there is to do, or even really the money of it. But I get overwhelmed by the fact that I'm basically living this instead of living something else. Because to me, really, it's about the stories of the cars and not working on the cars or, you know, any of that. Like having the cars in some cases is important to me. But in the past couple months, it has become clear to me through two instances, one of which happened just today, that it's not about having the stuff for me in every situation. Some of the stuff I consider to be like part of the family, like the BMW, you know, the Vagabond Rabbit, the Spitfire, that kind of thing. But in some cases, I think I've been holding on to things because I wanted to hold on to the story. I wanted to like be more of the story. I wanted to like have my own, you know, name signed to this car's history. And what I lost sight of is that in the time it takes me to write that part of the story, somebody else could have been having a whole lot of fun with the car. Somebody could have been getting it on the road, enjoying it, taking it to shows or doing whatever, and here it is just sitting. I'm talking, of course, about cars like the Audi Fox. When I bought that Fox, it was a two-owner car from Columbia, Missouri, which is about 25 miles north. It, to my knowledge, had never left maybe like a 50-mile radius. It certainly never left the state of Missouri. It was owned by an elderly gentleman who went into a nursing home, and I believe he just sold his belongings when he went into the nursing home. It was bought then by a Packard collector, which is awesome, and put it as the odd duck out of the Packard collection. But he saw it come up on Marketplace, and he said, you know, I can't live with the idea of this thing being crushed, which is probably what's going to happen to a car like this, so he bought it. And, you know, this not being Oregon or Washington or California, that kind of car would end up in a demolition derby, which we'll come back to that later, a lot quicker than it would end up in a collection. I started trying to uncover the car's history, and that's when I found out about the owner. And I went to the address on the paperwork, and there was no house. So I went back and I looked at the Google images on Google Maps, and I saw the car under a tarp. And the car sat under the tarp, the tarp wore away over the years, and you could see it started to get exposed, and then there was no house. What had happened was, something happened in that house and it blew up. Somebody passed away in this explosion. It wasn't the owner of the car, but somebody passed away, I believe, when this house blew up. And then it was razed, and that was when the car was sold. this car is probably the only one left of its spec. I don't know who would have spec'd this interior with this exterior in the first place. That's weird. And then it's an Audi Fox 4-door. So it's got the same fuel injection as a Porsche, which means you pay Porsche prices for your fuel injection parts on your Audi Fox. And it is extremely complicated to work on for anybody who doesn't know what L-Jet or K-Jet, whichever one it is, does and is. So around here, it would have been crushed. And if it made it as far as Cash for Clunkers, it would have been crushed then. It would have been demo derbied. It would have been junked. It would have been, parted out. To have it still be here and to see the care that the owner took, to patch up all the spots that were starting to rust and, keep the interior in such good working condition, that car was loved. That's possibly the only one left. And around here, the odds are against it to even make it this far in the first place. That's amazing to me. I love that. And so that's why I bought the car. Well, at the time, it actually ran and drove. It drove itself up on the trailer, but I guess it had been sitting for so long and rust had started to get in places, and you could hear the impeller on the water pump as it spun around. You could hear it like clanging around on the housing. So it needed the water pump replaced, but it ran and drove just fine. And that was the last time it ran. I don't know. Why do I don't wear a watch. I always do that anyway. It was like 5 years ago now that I brought that car home. And I think about that one a lot because I love it. I love how unique it is. I love that it has survived in this area so long, being different than literally everything else around. Hello, I think I see some connection to that car here. But at the end of the day, just keeping it in a shed or a shop isn't really doing it a whole lot of good. So I can't justify keeping it really any longer than I have. Also, it was hit by a tornado under my watch. So in fact, it's gotten way worse under my ownership, although that was dumb luck, I think, really, more than anything else. And yet, I can't justify holding on to it just to be part of that memory. Does that make sense? Like, I can't be writing the story if the story is not being written. If I'm just open on a blank page and doing nothing with the story, then the story is not being written. So I think that it needs to go to somebody who will continue writing that story. And that brings me to the other part of this. I've considered selling stuff before, but you just never know who you're going to sell to. You can't control what happens to that car down the road. And I guess it's one thing, right? Because you've got all these YouTubers who say like, oh, I went and looked at my car's VIN number and now it's in a junkyard and it's been totaled. Or, oh, I came across my original car again. It was in somebody's yard and it was like ruined and all this other stuff like that. Like, I understand that you can't prevent things from happening, but like, I'm just so afraid that I'm going to sell one of these cars to somebody who to my face is like, yeah, I'm going to preserve this. I'm going to be like, living, the life that it's supposed to live or whatever. And then they're going to turn around and junk it or shoot it or whatever. The Toyota Tercel, which you may notice is not here, has been sold. I'm not talking about stuff I want to do here. I'm talking about stuff I'm already doing. I have already started selling stuff because this just doesn't add up. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a way to keep this going. But I think also, even if I did, I think I've lost the plot a little bit. I think it's a lot more about living the stories, and what I'm about to tell you is part of that story. So the Toyota Tercel, I bought, let me cut the camera so we don't lose a file and have to do this all over again. The Tercel was bought maybe 4 years ago. I already had the big shop at that time, and the Tercel came from Columbia, Missouri, which again, 40 minutes north or however far it is. And it belonged to a kid who was going to go live out of his Tacoma. He was going to go overland. He had enjoyed Toyotas his whole life, and his uncle had had this car for like decades, and he had driven it to and from work, which was like 80 miles. And he was I found paperwork in the car that suggested he was a professional line dancer, which, I mean, I can't do that, but that's kind of cool, And he was working in the mines by day as a literal miner, and then line dancing at night, or honky-tonk, line dancing at night. So I thought that was like just an eclectic, like weird mix of things. And to find evidence of that scattered throughout the car, like to find his sunglasses and to find like receipts and stuff like that was just so cool. And the kid had driven it to and from work in Columbia. It had been driven a lot, obviously by the body, you can tell it had been driven a lot. And I drove it home. I paid $500, I drove it home. And that was the second to last time I drove it because I had so many other things going on. I think I had just gotten this infamous, very shitty C4 Corvette, and it was taking most of my time. It quickly became apparent to me that like that car needed way more work than I was able to put into it. It needed rust remediation in a big way. The underside looked as bad as the outside did. And the interior was, you know, filthy and dirty, needed to be taken completely apart. The engine was leaking everything it could leak, and it was just over my head. So I parked it. The next thing I did was I took it down and I thought, well, I want to pay a shop to figure out what's wrong with this thing, but I don't want to spend a lot of money. So I said, $12 for a state inspection. That'll give me an idea of what's wrong. So I paid it for a $12 state inspection, which of course it failed. The reason it failed was because it had 12-year-old tires on the front and 14-year-old tires on the back, and the shocks were completely shot. Those are the only reasons. That car passed state inspection as it looked. I don't know how to make of that, but it did. And with all the leaks and everything, it passed. So I parked it. And but when I went to get that inspection done, the guy at the shop came out and he said, dude, you're a popular guy today. I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, my shop guys love this car, dude. One of them said they'd give you $500 today if you'd sell that car. He said he wants to put it in the demolition derby. I said, he wants to do what? No, thank you. I'm good. And I politely declined the offer of destroying my car, which, again, listen, that's where I am, man. That's what happens to old, shitty-looking cars around here. You know, they don't get saved. And I guess that happens everywhere, but it certainly is the case around here. Sacrilege. I declined that offer. I brought the car home, and that's the last thing I did with it until I put it up on Marketplace. I talked so much to Katie. I said, what happens if somebody buys this car and they destroy it? What happens if somebody buys this car and they don't give a shit about it? And she said, look, you can't really control that, and you don't know that's going to happen until you put yourself out there, right? Put the car out there and at least try and sell it and see who's interested in it. So I put it on Marketplace, and about a month and a half later, I think it was, a guy named Aaron messaged me. Hey, I am up here from Tennessee in Missouri. I'm about an hour and a half away from you, and I happen to have my car dolly with me. I would like to buy that Toyota. And he wrote like a really passionate message about it, to the point where I felt like I was getting sold like some kind of weight loss thing or something. Like I was wondering, like, how are you this passionate, you know, right out the gate? And I remembered, this is what I'm looking for. This is the guy. So we talked, and when he showed up, going an hour and a half out of his way for this, however much, I think it was $1,000 car, I am not kidding. You would have thought he was buying a Rolls Royce. Like he was so effing excited. And it turned out that he, I believe, had a family member pass away, and back in the day, him and the family member had a Toyota just like that. And he had so many good memories of driving around the countryside and just dicking around and doing shit you do when you're a kid in this car. And you know, you can't have the person back, but you can remake some of the memories, and you can kind of relive what it was like to be back in those times with a car. The cars can be vehicles for so many different kinds of memories. They're not just merely a vehicle in terms of A to B. They bring back memories. And hearing him tell that story, I started to realize as he was telling me this, like, wait a second, I feel this way about my BMW, right? You know, trim holes and all, like rust and all, like shitty faded paint and all, like, I love this thing. I love the story it tells. It tells me a story of all my Hot Wheels cars that were beat up because I played with them so much when I was a kid. I didn't keep anything perfect as a kid, you know? You just play with it and it gets beat up and dusty and shit. And that's how it's supposed to be. That shows that it was used and loved. Anyway, I saw him looking at this Tercel, which to me was like, maybe I'll make a gambler out of it or something. And he saw this like beautiful potential in the thing. I just was blown away. And, you know, nobody who knew me, nobody who knew that car believed that somebody showed up, trailered it 8 hours home to Tennessee, and then sent me a picture saying, hey, here it is next to my other hatchback Toyota from the 80s. I'm so excited about this. I just took my family in it. I took my friends in it. I've been calling everybody I know. They all think I'm crazy, but I'm taking them all around in this Toyota, and I'm just as happy as I could be. Thank you so much for selling me this car. That right there, that's what it's about. You know, the fact that I can make somebody's day with an old rusty Toyota, you know, like how else are you going to do that? Like just the fact that like that Toyota made somebody's day, and everybody I knew was like, that thing's a piece of shit. You need to junk it. You need to sell it to the guy who said he was going to put it in a demolition derby. And I said, no, I think there's somebody out there who's going to love it and think it's as unique as I do, and even more. And they're going to feel the same way about that as I do about this standard Vanguard or this GT6, you know? And I found that person. Louis Rossman has a very interesting quote about this.
When you actually are doing work that has that level of value and you know that you're responsible for that building getting built, you're responsible for this car being able to drive and that person being able to make it to their brother's funeral, you're responsible for this person having their data again, you're responsible for this person being able to complete their PhD thesis in time. It changes things, and it makes those little tasks that no person in their right mind would ever be passionate about doing because it's just mundane and aggravating, and it turns it into a fun, exciting challenge that makes you feel like you're not actually working even when you are. And I wish more guidance counselors would talk about this.
Like, I don't love parting with the cars, right? I don't love the idea of not being able to have those experiences, you know? I don't love the idea of not being able to take this GT6 down to a car show one day. I don't love the idea of having sold the car that was able to connect me with my great-grandmother for the last time when she was alive that I was ever going to see her, and allowed my father to have that experience as well. I don't like the idea of selling that car, right, that was so cohesive to that trip and that experience. But I do love the idea of it finding a home where it's going to be cherished and it's going to make somebody happy. And that might not be the guy that I sell it to. It might not be the person I sell it to. It might not be the next person. But it's going to go on that journey, and it's going to leave the nest and find its own way. And yes, that does mean that maybe rolling the dice, it's going to get totaled or crushed or shot at or whatever. And I can't help that. I've discovered, like, in that journey that I'm kind of living two different lives, right? I'm trying to live two different things. Like, there's this duality that exists. And on one hand, I don't aspire to the tangible. You know, I don't set out about this like, oh, I'm going to have this GT6 and that's going to be like, the reason I'm excited is because I have the car, I can look at it in the shop, and it is a thing that exists. Not when given the choice between experiences and memories and the thing, would I almost ever choose the thing. I'll hoard boxes and boxes of my past while living a life that completely exists without them. I'll forget what's in them, only to never be able to bring myself to throw them away again. There are many dualities of the modern man, and I suppose this is one of them, but it's one that I can't healthily let coexist within me. I guess this is a roundabout way of saying that I've got too much stuff and not enough memories being made. I do love the idea of being able to curate a car collection. I have a dream of having like a normal museum type thing, you know, where you have like just a bunch of normal cars that went about their lives, like this Volkswagen that's got 269,000 miles and a bunch of rust because it was driven daily, 80 miles round trip a day in Iowa by a very religious enthusiast of Volkswagens who just saw this one as a daily driver. You know, the car I'm sitting on right now, the GT6, was owned by a barefoot water skier who passed away barefoot water skiing at a ripe old age. And I can't barefoot water ski in my 30s, so I mean, there you go. But like, this was his project that he just always looked at in the garage and said, one of these days, man, one of these days. But his passion obviously was somewhere else, and sometimes that's the story. But, you know, I don't want to be where these stories end. I don't think I'm doing a lot of justice to some of these cars by letting them sit and get worse. And frankly, I can't do it. Like, I'd have to make so much fucking money to be able to afford to pay people to fix these and keep them up and drive them the whole time and store them. It just gets outlandish. You know, my dad had a 1953 Ford F-100 when I was growing up. I think he sold it when I was like 8 years old. And even at the time, he sold it because he didn't want to continue to pay storage fees on it, because he had to rent a storage unit in order to store the car. And that was back then when, you know, storage was a lot cheaper than it is now. And still, he, you know, being an accountant, was like, listen, I'm going to spend more than this car's worth in the next 30 years, like whether I build a garage or whether I store it somewhere off site and I always have to go tinker with it because it's always been sitting. You know, is it really worth having the thing, or can I just go to car shows and with my son who's 8 and have the experience of cars without having to own the thing? And I see a little bit of myself in that decision right now. I don't want to get rid of everything, but I'm going to have to get rid of some things. These are the breakups, and there ain't no way through but through. So I guess we're just going to have to do it. It ain't just cars, by the way. It's also bicycles. I'm currently wading through a group of like 20 bicycles that I bought because they were all cheap at auction. They were like $2 here, $3 there. This one over here, this Orange Manu France, rare in the United States, was sold new in Columbia, Missouri, as apparently everything I own was new in Columbia, Missouri, and still even has the Columbia, Missouri license plate on it. But it, again, what am I doing? You know, it came out of an apartment over here locally that somebody got, I guess, evicted from or moved out of, and they left it behind. So I was contacted by somebody in town. Hey, I know you're into bikes. Would you like to buy this bike? And I'm like, sure, yeah, awesome. But when that happens this many times, what am I doing? You know, in a former life, I was a bicycle shop employee and I worked on bicycles for a living. And I know how to do all this, but I just don't have enough hands and enough time. Like, look how much time it would take to get this many bikes on the road, and you're really going to take them down and refinish all the bearing races and, you know, fix all the bottom brackets and fix all the stems and straighten all the tire wheels and get new tires on all of them. Like, you're going to be here forever. And I could just sell them and maybe they'll find a good home, you know, which I did today. I sold a unicycle today. There's still one over here, but I sold the first unicycle today to a juggler. A crusty juggler.
Crusty jugglers.
Crusty jugglers.
I love me some Hot Fuzz, but I literally sold it to a juggler.
Juggler.
The kid, I say kid, he's well into his 20s, I think, at this point, is a juggler.
Juggler.
And he's continuing to hone his craft of juggling. And he said, listen, the more I get into this, more people are riding unicycles. And I'm like, dude, I got to get a unicycle. I got to learn how to do this. And I said, my guy, if you learn how to juggle riding my unicycle, this $20 unicycle that looks like it's going to fall apart, send me some video of that because I would love that. And he was like, dude, I'll send you video if I learn to juggle on this thing. It'd be so cool. And I told him how I made it like down the hallway once, and that was about it. He said, I don't know much about cars, but I love this. Like, I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you've got like the history of the cars and the story, like in the paint and everything like that. Like the wear and tear on them is all cool. He totally got it. It was very refreshing to not only meet somebody who just totally understood it, but also was going to get use out of this unicycle that I'd had hanging on the wall for like 4 years and had no use for at all. Something that I literally cannot use, do not know how to use, do not have the bone structure to be able to use. If I fall, I'd probably break in half. And here he's going to get some use out of it. And he's going to use it to entertain people and to hone his craft of juggling.
Juggler.
That's what it's about. I just had this light bulb moment. Like the other night when I saw this Lewis video, it just kind of all came together. I was like, that's what it's about. No, I don't love the idea of having to part ways with things that I thought I was going to be able to do. No, I don't love the idea of, you know, fixing a Corvette for 100 million hours and every single time I go on the forum they say, oh, it's definitely this over here, and I go do it and it's not. And then they say, oh, well, if that didn't work, then go do this. Selling the Corvette was not only a weight off my shoulders, but another example of just like, it's okay to let things go. And I know there are people out there who already figured that out. I'm sure I figured it out at one point in my life and forgot it, and I'm sure I'll forget it again. But as I said in the beginning, this is, for largely monetary reasons, unsustainable. But at the end of the day, I just think it's not doing justice to the things to continue to keep them. And truly, I didn't expect to keep them this long. If it hadn't been for spending the last 6-7 months moving the warehouse and all that other shit, I think I may have gotten to some of this by now. But, you know. I'm sure I'll talk more in future videos about this, but like, I kind of feel like the odd one out around here trying to sell this stuff, because around here, this is not the car culture at all. Not only like the patina of it all and stuff, but like just literally these cars. I've always been the odd one out, which I've always enjoyed. And I like the challenge of trying to find them good homes. If you're interested in the following cars, the ones that are on screen right now, shoot me a message. I mean, you know what this is about at this point. Like, if you made it this far, you probably know what I'm looking for in a buyer. So if you find any interest in any of those cars, shoot me a message. There will be more coming, but those are the ones that I know for sure I'm going to be parting with. So yeah, reasonable prices down here at Justin's Used Cars. I'll make you a damn good deal. We'll get you home today. Something like that. So yeah, more to come. I am alive. The cars did end up under a roof. I am happy that that happened, and I'm trying to remember that I'm lucky to have had that happen. But I do think it is time for the remainder of the breakups to be on my terms. And I think that there is going to be solace in the thought that I may not enjoy that, and I may not enjoy watching the potential of what I thought I might do walk out the door. But I will enjoy the idea that it's going to a better place, and that it is, that's not like somebody died. No one died, to be clear. Yeah, we'll cut all this out. So anyway, I know I'm not going to enjoy that, but I'm going to do it for the cars, and I'm going to do it for the people who are going to enjoy those cars. So, yeah. All right, more to come. Oh, I'm taking a huge gamble on a motorcycle I bought at auction too. We'll talk about that later. All right, see ya.